The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. The Interior Department, which has not exactly had the best reputation and sort of PR outcomes under the stewardship of Secretary Ryan Zinke, now appears to be becoming basically, I guess, what is being called a white lily department, basically a white department, white staff. Ryan Zinke has repeatedly said, according to a number of employees in the Department of the Interior, that he's not going to focus on diversity. And that really seems to be having an impact, because three high-ranking Interior officials from different divisions are saying that a number of comments have been made saying, I don't care about diversity, that's not important. And that every single time Zinke follows it up with something like, what's important is having the right person for the job, or I care about excellence and I'm going to get the best people, and you'll find we have the most diverse group anyone's ever had. However, the Interior Department last year reassigned 33 senior executive staffers, nearly half of which were minorities, drastically more than what you would see in general representation in the American population, according to a lawyer for one of the staffers that was moved. Some of those who were reassigned have filed complaints with the U.S. Merit Systems Board, which reviews these types of decisions. And it's interesting that the accusations against Zinke are building. Zinke's already under investigation for taxpayer expenditures of taxpayer money related to travel, which seems to be sort of a rampant problem, incipient problem within the Trump administration. And we will see ultimately what comes of this. But I don't think that there's really any shock here. Like, I know that there will be some people who hear this. There's basically going to be two camps. There will be those who say, okay, fine, he said those things, but he did say, let's forget about focusing on diversity, and we will end up with a diverse group by hiring the most qualified people. Well, if that's the case, then why even talk about diversity or not? If by its natural process you're ending up with a diverse group without considering diversity, then you wouldn't expect to see nearly 50% minority reassignment of individuals. Just none of it makes any sense, and it continues to paint a picture of Zinke as just a really not good guy.
You know, it probably is. There's so much cronyism and patronage and nepotism all through the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Zinke's probably just hiring the people who he knows, the people who he's familiar with, and those tend to be those in your inner circle. Maybe they look like you.
Yep.
And I think that's probably what has a lot to do with it, right?
Yeah, isn't he from Montana or something like that?
Yeah, the majority white, that's for sure.
Yeah, if he's hiring his friends, then statistically speaking, they're certainly going to be mostly white. I genuinely don't like Zinke. Like, with a lot of these people, I don't really have a personal problem. I just think, you know, they're kind of being pushed around by the system, and they're falling into circumstances where they're making decisions that I think they didn't necessarily predict they would make, but they're not really bad people. With some of these individuals, and Zinke is on that list for me, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I keep going back to. She just really strikes me as someone who relishes the lies that she tells. Some of the Trump staffers strike me as genuinely not good people. And it takes a lot for me to say that, because I think people are mostly good, but often end up in circumstances where they end up doing things that they probably would not envision or be proud of doing.
Yeah, there are some people in the Trump administration who I could imagine myself getting along with, or at least if I can't get along with them, I know that they're like patriots and serving the best interests of the country to
like who?
What they think. I don't know, like Nikki Haley, perhaps, or General Mattis.
Yeah.
You know, I think they're acceptable people.
Yeah, to some degree, maybe. Although Haley's got some pretty vile stuff that she's been willing to say, and I would question how great of a person anyone who's even willing to say some of those things, even if they don't believe him. But yeah, I mean, Mattis. I don't even know about Mattis. He's kind of a wacky guy when it comes to. He's just compared to Trump. In Trump's circle, he's a more moderate guy. Zinke's disgusting, and I hope that he goes, and I hope one of these investigations ultimately takes him down.
Just one more point on this. You remember when Trump was picking a vice presidential candidate?
Yeah.
And he said specifically that he wasn't going to choose a woman or a minority because he thought that would come across as pandering.
Right.
I think that's a little bit more actively anti-diversity because he's saying he's specifically going to pick a white male.
Yeah, he's preemptively saying anyone, regardless of qualifications, who's a woman or not white, I'm excluding from the search at its base.
At least Zinke's saying I'm only looking at the qualifications and the results aren't favorable to what we'd like to see, but
I mean, what Trump said violates Employment Non-Discrimination Act law for any normal business. If any business said we're restricting our search to men who are not minorities, that would break the law. That would not be allowed under ENDA by its very nature. Good luck enforcing that because we know labor law is very, very difficult to enforce. I want to tell you about a 60-year-old woman called Karen Cooper. Karen Cooper married a tree during a community event a few days ago at the Snell Family Park. This was part of a neighborhood effort to save the tree from being cut down. She said, when I heard that the city was trying to cut down the tree, I was like, I don't think so. She's been living in Fort Myers, Florida for nearly 40 years. I'm just having fun with something very serious. And she had a marriage ceremony with the tree. It's not clear whether this will lead to the tree not being removed. And of course, it's not a legal marriage. There was a replica. There was a ceremony done which resembled what we sort of think of as a wedding ceremony, but of course you're not legally allowed to marry a tree. But hey, listen, if the right-wingers are right, if gay marriage is really going to lead to people being able to marry objects, I'm sure very soon, any day now, you'll be able to legally marry a tree, right?
That's exactly it. That's what they were saying. If you allow gays to marry, then people are going to start marrying in groups, and then they're going to start marrying animals, and then they'll start marrying trees, I guess. Yeah, that's like the next step.
It's the logical next step if you buy into the ridiculous logic of some of these homophobic individuals. I actually, this is really like out of a environmental concern, right? And it is just kind of funny. The woman is not really even thinking that she is in love with or married to or in a relationship with the tree. But we've actually covered stories before where there are, I think they're called mechanophiles, people that are basically in love with, attracted to, aroused by not so much devices, but sort of like machines of different kinds.
Okay.
Like there was a woman who was obsessed with a Ferris wheel and I think believed was in a relationship with the Ferris wheel, a woman who was in love with the train and her car. And of course, none of them can get legally married, but it seems to me that there's only one explanation, which is mental illness. It's not something I'm not trying to stigmatize it, but I'm saying I'm not aware of any sort of healthy circumstance in which someone would believe that they are in a romantic relationship with a vehicle or a train, you know?
Yeah, this is better, I think, because the woman actually isn't attracted to the tree. She's just doing this to make a point.
Yeah.
And also, the tree at least is a living organism,
Sure,
so that's not as bad as marrying a machine, perhaps.
I guess if you had to find some way in which it's more logical to marry a tree than to marry a train, we, in a way, evolved from trees.
Yeah, that's true.
So
I wonder if she's going to consummate the marriage.
Yeah, I don't even exactly know how you would do that, but I would assume that she's not. Netflix has been banned from competing in the Cannes Film Festival, and the explanation is that they don't really release their films in the way that films are released in theaters. They do produce movies, long-form films, but they debut them on an online streaming service, and thus they're not allowed in the Cannes Film Festival. I think that this is really pretty stupid, and the truth is that if the idea is only to deal with those who are involved in theater releases, either for financial decisions or because there's some material way in which theater-released films are different than Netflix-released films, then make that case. But just saying they don't put the films in theaters, to me, is not really a good reason to exclude Netflix films from the film festival.
Maybe they're looking at like box office data, like how much did this film gross at the theater itself, and that's something you can't really measure in comparison to something on Netflix because that's like a subscription service.
Counter to that would be if the films are being awarded not on the basis of how much money they make, but based on the merit, voting and the merit, then it really shouldn't make a difference, I think would be the counter argument to that. And this, I know that in a way it's like, who cares? All these companies are making an insane amount of money. These are people in the 0.1%, top 1.1% of the world, incredibly wealthy. Who cares if they can't get their Cannes Film Festival awards? But I think the bigger thing is that if what is underlying this is this sort of insiders club mentality where we want to keep out whoever's not doing it the way we want it done, which is either working with the film theater industrial complex or, you can imagine how if there is a TV show award, by keeping Netflix out and only allowing in the shows that are released on cable channels and broadcast channels, that's a big hat tip to internet service providers and cable companies, which donate a ton of money in order to sort of keep a stranglehold of the industry. Netflix is gigantic now, right? The idea that little tiny Netflix is being discriminated against. Netflix spends billions of dollars on programming. It's not me standing up for a little guy that's not really a little guy. It's more the idea that let's all get on the same page as to what are the standards for a film and its consideration, and why is it that non-theater release disqualifies it from consideration for the awards.
It's legacy media trying to make fun of or leave out new media.
Or diminish in some way.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to work ultimately, because even these like film festivals, award shows, things like the Oscars, the Emmys, or the Grammys, they're all declining in ratings.
They're all declining in ratings. It's all garbage. I mean, I stopped watching all of this nonsense. I think that the only other way that we could consider this, because I usually disagree with slippery slope arguments, there is a slippery slope sort of idea here, which is if you allow Netflix in, you don't know what the distribution was, and then all of a sudden you've got to consider any random YouTube documentary that goes straight to YouTube that has a few 100,000 views or something. But the thing is, we might not know how many people saw a movie on Netflix, but we know that Netflix's distribution is absolutely gigantic. So the idea that its maximum possible platform wasn't that high is bogus. Thing is, you can also make the same case on YouTube, right? There's like 1 billion people on YouTube or something like that. But you know how many people watched a movie on YouTube. I understand that you can start to get into a slippery slope type of thing, but I think that no matter where you draw the line, Netflix is on the far side of the line. They make it no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Cannes Film Festival people would make the argument. Cannes Film Festival?
Cannes.
Cannes?
Cannes.
Spelled C-A-N-N-E-S. That's Cannes?
You're being serious right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Cannes Film Festival. Okay. It's a French word, yeah.
All right, well, I'm sure they would say that Netflix can make its own award show. And
what's the point of that?
Yeah, they would be in a league of their own.
That would be ridiculous.
Just
that would
like
be
online streaming awards.
Yeah, that would be like Fox Searchlight saying you've won a Fox Searchlight award, and the only films considered for the award are movies produced by Fox Searchlight. Like, yeah, you can do it, but at a certain point, it's basically just masturbation.
We should have a David Pakman Show award ceremony at the end of each year,
where we award the best episodes of the show. It's like, who would care, you know?
Best host, best producer.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that off air. Could be something there. Who knows? There might be some funny angle to it. All right, that's it for today's bonus show. We'll talk to you next week, which is a normal week, and then the following week is a very abnormal week, and I'll tell you more about that next week.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.